And welcome to Aspiring Artist Podcast. If you are looking to harness your creativity, learn industry secrets, or simply get inspired to kick your hobby into gear, this is the show for you. I'm your host, Rachel Sandler, and today we welcome to the podcast a very special guest, Geraldine Anello.
Woohoo! Hi.
Hi, Geraldine.
Hello.
So Geraldine is a Broadway regular, filling the hats of conductor, keyboardist, and pianist for Kinky Boots, School of Rock, A Bronx Tale, Aladdin, On the Town, SpongeBob the Musical, An American in Paris, On Your Feet, The Cher Show, Finding Neverland, and Matilda on Broadway. I cannot even get through that in one breath. That is insane. Geraldine has also worked with Sarah Bareilles, Ingrid Michaelson, and numerous other talented artists over the course of her career to date. Currently, she is the leader of the Theater Music Directors, an industry group of over 8,500 members worldwide, and is the author of the upcoming book, Music Sessions, Unplugged and Unfiltered with A-List Musicians. I am so excited to welcome Geraldine to the show today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so excited to have you. I'm like, is that really like 15 Broadway shows? They just keep going.
I have to say, when you read it, I was like, wait, it doesn't end?
Like, I did that, and I did that too.
Well, what's fun is that they're great, right? Like, I love those shows. So now, like, you're reading this list, I'm just like, oh, yeah, fun. Oh, yeah, that one I like too. So it's like down the line of memory lane, but fast track and really fun.
Oh, absolutely. Such an awesome list of shows, for sure.
Thank you.
I would kind of love to know. So I'm sure this is a really long story, but what was your journey like to get to Broadway?
Starting at what point?
Oh my gosh. So I guess like, you know, kind of when you were a kid, like, is that something you knew you wanted to do?
Totally. So, okay. So first of all, it's to me, that story still what blows my mind with it is that I grew up on a tiny little French island off the coast of South Africa. And there's really no reason that anyone who grows up on like that island had less people than New York City.
Oh,
that anyone from there could possibly like end up out of there even. I don't know. But so I loved it, but I started piano there, moved back to mainland France where I'm originally from in my teens, continued taking piano, did the thing that all of us pianists tend to, which is we start getting hired at some point between age 13 and 15.
Sure.
Before you know you want to be a professional, you're like accompanying choirs and you're teaching piano and all of that. So I did that. And then I got a scholarship to come to the US. It was just like a 9 months program. I was like, sure, that sounded like a good like in-between year because I wasn't sure. In France, there wasn't a thing where I could do pop music and I could do like more playing and less theory. It was very like either classical or all theory. So I was like, I'll take that year off. And I came to the US, did not speak English.
Oh my God.
Which I did not know until I landed here. And I was like, oh no, I don't understand anything they say. And I don't know what to say back. And then after those 9 months, I ended up staying. And then I did my master's at Western Michigan University. Then I did my doctorate at Boston University. Then I lived in different states, worked in different places. I've been to like 41 states or something ridiculous.
Wow.
And then eventually made it to New York City. So it's been quite a journey. But as far as knowing about musical theater or not, I think, you know, France does not have a lot of musical theater. There's not a culture of it like there is here, where here you're in middle school, you're going to do your like middle school show at the end of the year. And you're in high school, you can be really involved in that community. There's no such thing in France. So it was more something like I would find a show, like I remember watching Cats, you know, and that felt like something really epic, and this was, you know, on TV, and I was like, whoa, like what a cool thing.
Right.
But I didn't know it was a job. It was not a job in France. So while I loved music and I loved theater, I did not know it was even an option.
Got it. So were you mostly studying classical music as a kid then?
Yeah, 100%. It was all classical. And then by the time I was in my teens, of course, I was like, I don't really want to do all that classical, but I was not in an environment where saying that was okay. So I just started getting books and singing pop songs.
Okay.
So all of a sudden singing and playing at the same time, that kept me hooked. And then I started writing songs and all of that. And so that was like, oh, that's where I can find my fun in parallel to the classical stuff.
Sure. So like in continuing your education, did you do a master's and DMA in the classical world as well? Or
Sure did.
Okay.
Well, I don't think there's a DMA in like fun music. You know, I don't think it's like, oh, I'm going to get a doctorate in in R&B. Like
Right.
that's not a thing.
I have no clue. I mean, I know there's master's degrees and like more kind of fun stuff, but you're right. I've never
It's
heard of a
jazz.
doctorate.
It's like classical or jazz. Like otherwise, the only options are Berkeley, and Berkeley is amazing, but Berkeley does not have those like higher level degrees. And so for me, I felt like it would be going backwards if I. And on top of that, they didn't have scholarships, which I really needed, being an immigrant and all of that. So
Sure.
yeah.
So how did you get that musical theater experience, or did you just come to New York and then all of a sudden all your skills as a pianist kind of translated into that world?
So as the first story goes, I was in high school and I randomly was looking for these sheet music of songs, and I found this sheet music of a book called Les Miserables, and I was like, oh, I know Les Miserables, the book, like we all studied it in school. Somebody made songs out of it. How fun. So I got that book, came home, sight read everything. I was like, these are pretty good songs. I like them. Like, how fun would it be if this was on stage? Like, have they thought of putting this on stage? So I was 16. Okay. So I did that. I gathered my friends. I asked the principal if I could get a room, which like no one did in school. I was like, can we please like make this happen? We did 2 shows of Les Miserables, and I literally was like, well, the songs don't connect in the story. So I'm going to get actual excerpts from the Victor Hugo book and have a reader read them between the songs so we can follow the story along. And we staged it. We did lights, we had piano, we had everything. And the second day for the second performance, I remember beforehand laying down like in a park and closing my eyes and like feeling like this was the best thing ever. And I was like, if only there was a job where I would get to do that every day, but not just twice, but like way more. Like how incredible would that be? And I remember that feeling. So all of that to say, I invented musical theater.
I was going to say at 16, like you made your own Les Mis musical without even knowing that Les Mis was a musical.
And it took me years. It took me coming to the US to learn that that's what it was. That it was an actual known thing. No one knew it. I mean, where we performed it, no one had heard of it. We knew the Victor Hugo book, but no one knew the musical.
So was it so crazy the day that you learned those songs that already existed already had an existing?
I think I felt a little betrayed. Like, excuse me, it's my show. Like, did you ask for the rights?
They stole this from me.
What felt very special is that I did get to meet the authors and the writers of it years later in New York City, and we had like a 45-minute conversation on the sidewalk, and it was like, here's this man that wrote this show that meant so much to me at the time, and like that felt very full circle.
Absolutely. That is so cool. So kind of piggybacking off of that, like, can you tell us a little bit about some of your favorite Broadway moments?
Well, very recent was the Cher show, which as everyone who's been a part of it or like legend, I think has it now, had this very cool dance moment at the end where in the pit, they had started just in one, like there's a mega mix at the end. And so one of the pit members would just stand up and start dancing, and they had special lights that they would turn on that would just flicker. And it turned into a whole proper dance party while we were playing, and it lasted for 10 minutes. And so they told all the subs, like, you have to do it too. And so you're there at the piano, and like we all have videos of like the whole pit standing up, like violinists and guitars, and we're just like jamming with each other. That was so, it's like really, I get to like be paid while I have a dance party with my friends.
Oh, wow.
So that was really fun.
That's so amazing. Is the pit for a Cher show, are they on stage? So can they be seen by the audience, or it was just
we could be seen. I mean, it was very traditional pit. So like people could see if they were on like the first couple rows, maybe on the balcony, but not like distracting from and you know, I mean, on stage it was a mega mix. They were dancing, so it's not like we were like it wasn't a serious moment and we're just jamming and doing something random. You know, it like matched the feeling. And we asked people. I mean, the audience were often dancing along too, because like everybody stood up and would clap, and so they would love it when they would look down, like, oh, they're doing it too. They're having fun as well, like not just us. So that was really fun.
I love that. That is, I feel like that's such like true Broadway spirit. Like everyone who's there like wants to be there. Like you're at the top of your game. You're just having a great time.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice when the music calls for it, right? Because there's so many Broadway shows that are very serious and much more restrained, and the music calls for more seriousness. So I think the music informs the feel of the pit a lot.
Oh, totally. That makes sense. So like, have you ever found that your mood is like when you're doing a musical like SpongeBob, which is just like a ton of fun, versus, I don't know, something that maybe is a little bit more serious? Do you feel like that affects like the tone of what's going on in the pit?
So SpongeBob, I did only rehearsals. So I don't know what that experience would be like playing in that pit, although I'm sure it was great because it was led by the wonderful Julie McBride. But yeah, I think, what was I forget the question.
Oh, so just like when you're in the pit of a musical, do you feel like the whole tone of the energy is different depending on, the type of show, if you're doing like more of a comedy or like more of a serious show?
I think so, but I think also by the actual placement of the pit, I think there's a different vibe if the pit is open, if you are on stage, if you are in a basement hidden from anyone. That informs how much like goofing around you can do as well, and how much you have to like keep a little bit of protocol.
Sure.
And I also think it just actually depends on the band and the leadership as well, right? So you have leaders that, it's a job, and they're right too, right? It's like, it's a job. We're here to be serious. Like, let's be focused. Let's make sure we, remember it's a job. And then there are leaders that are like, woo, party, and there's room for all of those people. Like, that's what makes it really good. So I don't think one is better than the other. And so to answer your question, yes, some of it is music related, some of it is placement pit related, and some of it is leadership related.
Sure. No, that makes total sense. So once you get to Broadway, you're clearly one of the top in the industry. So do you feel like you've had any struggles, like once you've gotten to that point, once you're in Broadway, like the sort of struggle that you face with really regarding anything?
Well, first of all, that's very sweet. I don't think of myself as like one of the top of Broadways. There are, like Broadway is filled with incredible talents, and lots of people really working like all the best shows all the time. But thank you for that.
Oh, sure.
I think that's something I've found, because I have this conversation a lot with people, and so I don't think it's just me, is that a common misconception people have is that once they'll come to Broadway will be like a sort of stamp of approval, like, yes, I made it. It must mean I'm good. I'm going to feel confident by that point. And it's most, like, oftentimes kind of the opposite happens, that because you get to Broadway and everyone is so incredible, you kind of, it's a bit of a reality check at the same time. So while you're there, it also very much keeps you striving to get better at all times. And it's so specific in styles and specific at every single, like, moment of any show and rehearsal, that you're like always like kept on your toes, I guess.
Sure. So what sorts of things can you do to keep bettering your craft and like looking ahead and avoid kind of that stall of, okay, I got to Broadway, like now what?
I mean, I think it's like, it's always being in the moment, because when you're doing a show, like the minute you're not quite there. I mean, a mistake happens so fast, and a mistake is not forgiven, right? Like, I feel like that's the difference with other jobs. Other jobs, you'll do something quote unquote wrong. You can go back and fix it kind of right away. You send the wrong name on an email. You say, hey, sorry, I meant this other name. You tell somebody it's this, and then you're like, oh wait, actually, no, it's that. You can always fix it. When you're in a performance, you made a mistake. There's no fixing. There's no fixing. It happened. Like, the only thing you can do now is next time don't do it again, but you can't fix it. And that kind of like pressure, I think, really, like, that mental game is what's tricky. And I don't have an answer to you, because it's just note after note after note. You're never going to get to a point where you're like, got it now. No more mistakes for me. Yay.
Right.
Right.
Nope.
Nope.
It's live performance. I mean, I was playing a production of Kinky Boots where my entire rig just shut down.
Yeah, well, at least that's not your fault. So.
Sure, but the audience doesn't know, right? To them, maybe they're oblivious to the whole thing, but it's live theater. Stuff happens.
Yeah, but I think it's like, who do you play for? Do you play for the audience? Do you play for your colleagues? Do you play for yourself? Do you play for your cast?
Sure.
So to me, it's like a rig that cracks down. It's not ideal and it's stressful, but at least it's not under my control. I mean, hopefully not. If it was, shit, but. But, it's like, I'm more looking at the things that are in my control, and am I doing the best I can to prevent mistakes? And the answer is, even if you are going to make mistakes. And that's just mind boggling.
Right. I know. It's crazy. It's like Broadway. They make mistakes too.
It's, that's our cross to bear right there, right there. Why?
Well, I feel like it's nice to know that there's not really perfection at any level.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Oh, do I know it?
Because, down on the ground, for these people who maybe are involved in community theater, I feel like maybe we're less hard on ourselves. Okay, the stakes aren't as high, or I'm not being paid. And then the second, you bring money into it. Okay, I'm in a professional theater. Okay, now I have to do better. Now I get to Broadway. Now I can't make mistakes at all. Like, that's just not possible.
I think of the musician's mindset. I don't know that there's that much a difference across levels. I think a musician is a musician, and we're trained to have that perfectionistic mindset and that growth mindset. And so I think across the board, we're all trying our very best. Like, I see in the theater music directors group, the amount of people who do amateur theater, and they are very committed and they really dedicate themselves and they take it very seriously. So I don't know that Broadway makes people be that way more. I think it's just that musician's mindset.
Yeah, I love that idea that, what we're doing is important on any level. We're still being a musician, whether I'm on Broadway or just doing this thing for 10 audience members for fun in my community.
Yeah, I think amateur theater, like, that's really difficult, and community theater for music directors in particular, because they're not given the resources they need to do their best. And I think that's really difficult because they know in their head, they have the vision for what it could be, and they're not given either the budget or the personnel or whatever it is they need to make it what they envision for it. And I think that's outside their control, but it's still something that they struggle with, having to still make something good when they are not given the means to do it.
Right.
So I respect them a lot for that, because I that's a hard thing to do.
Sure. Yeah, I get I think the music director on a community theater level is also the music supervisor and also the music producer, and any maybe the job that on Broadway would be done by a few people is being done by one.
Yeah.
So it definitely changes the trajectory of what's going on.
And money, means and resources. Like, can you afford to have AVMs? Can you afford to have cameras? Can you afford to have this size of a band and this amount of rehearsal? That matters. Those effects, that programming, those pedals.
Right. Like, how do we do Les Mis with 3 people in the pit?
Right. I did it with one.
Yes, just piano. I love that.
It was revolutionary.
Absolutely.
Listen, there's a tape of this somewhere. I believe there's a recording, and I don't know when it will resurface, but I'm pretty sure one day in my life I will see it again, and I'm very scared for that day.
You need to find it. That you could do like a then and now, like a glow up video, like, look where I've come.
Yeah, I may or may not have been playing Jean Valjean, so that's just tells you a lot right there.
Oh my gosh. I love that. So I would love to talk a little bit about your new book.
Woo! I'm so excited for it.
Yes. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what it's about, who it's for?
Yes. That book is exactly what I wish I had when I was getting started. That's where it comes from. That was me at the time being like, I have these questions. I want to know, am I going down the right segment of the industry? Am I prepared? Do I know all I need to know? What else do I need to know? Like, what is a life like that? And at the time I was debating, I was like, Broadway, but also like pop tours seems super cool, but I'm classically trained. Doesn't mean I'm great for pop. Doesn't mean I'm not great for pop. I did not have those answers, and I would go on Google and search engines, and there was no answers. Like, even interviews and stuff, they never delved into the nitty gritty of that. And so at the time I was like, fine, I'm going to go get the answers myself. And so I started contacting people at the top of the industry. Like, we're talking across the fields, across instruments. So I talked to people like music director of Katy Perry, people who, like, all the band members who worked with anyone from like Latin. We had Gloria Estefan, and we had Alicia Keys, and then you have TV like American Idol and SNL, and you've got classical with the Metropolitan Opera, military bands. Like, if you're a professional musician for decades at the top of that segment of the music industry, I wanted to talk to you, and I wanted to know, how did you make it and how did you keep it across time? And so it was great because I started it, then moved to New York, got to apply what I learned, then finished it interviewing my own colleagues. And then, so now, like, it's going to come out, and I'm so excited because I'm like, that answer, like, those answers are nowhere else. I want to help people. I want them to, like, not have to figure it out the hard way like I had to.
Right. That's so incredible. So how did you get in touch with these people in the first place?
I get that question, but emails.
I guess it's not that hard anymore.
I mean, what is tricky? Well, emails or anything I would find. Sometimes you have to write them on their website. Sometimes it was on Facebook. Sometimes what was tricky was keeping track of it, because a lot of people don't answer, and then some people answer, and then you have to find the time. I mean, there's definitely an organizational part of it, but that that shouldn't stop you. If you want to do something, sending email shouldn't be something difficult.
Sure. So can you tell, like, some of these people who might be listening, some of these aspiring artists, a couple of like the big takeaways that you learn from these people?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest one we kind of already touched on, which is that misconception that, like, when you're playing at the highest level, that you have that confidence. People are, I find a lot of people trying to make it in the field when they really think of confidence. Like, am I confident enough now to reach after these goals? Or, oh, should I get, will I reach there and then be confident? But the truth is, if you're a musician, you may not be that confident.
True.
And so you're just going to have to deal with it. You may have confident moments. You may have proud moments where you're like, man, I did it. Yes. But it comes a little bit after. It never comes before. And you can be confident on one performance one day, have a terrible mistake the next day on the same show, and not feel so confident. And that's across the levels. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, if we remove confidence from the equation, just go do the thing, no matter how you feel about it, then you're ahead of a lot of people. And that's true across genres and across segments of the industry, instruments, and decades of professional career.
Sure. So you don't put limitations on yourself and what you can do. Just, find that certain level of enough confidence that you can go out there and just do the thing.
Yeah. Work on the skills, but don't work on the confidence. Like, confidence will be up and down and up and down. So, but yeah, working at the highest level is not something that will give anyone confidence. If anything, it exposes you more. It makes you feel more vulnerable. More people hear you. More people have expectations of you. So it's a whole other thing too. And so you have to be ready for that.
Absolutely. It's so crazy because I guess every time I see a Broadway show, you look down in the pit and you're like, these people probably, this is their day job. They're not even thinking about it. But of course they are. They're musicians. They have to be continuously thinking and learning and making mistakes and fixing and learning as they go, right? Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you always have moments where you're like kind of checked out, but usually a mistake will happen and we'll say, hey, remember me? You're playing me. And then they'll be like, all right.
Right.
That's a good checkup right there. I mean, we're humans, we're not 100% with all the things all the time. We do the best we can, but Broadway musicians are very, very dedicated, very passionate. I mean, I have one of the people I interviewed in the book, Jeffrey Lee Campbell, used to play at Mamma Mia that entire run, which was, I think, 7 years. And he had that story that, like, at some point after a few years, there was this one exposed guitar arpeggio that was very simple to play, but he started just kind of not like being able to do. And then he got in his head and for like a long time could just not do it.
Oh no.
But that's a story that's very common. That's not his story. Like, that story happens a lot. You're able to do something and then all of a sudden it goes, and then you get so nervous about it you can't get it back for a while.
Oh, absolutely. I've experienced that so many times in pits. You mess something up once you've never messed up before. And then every time you get there, you're like, oh my God, am I going to get it this time? So yeah, that's awesome. I mean, not awesome that we're making mistakes, but I get awesome that that's a common experience we can all share as musicians.
Mm-hmm. And as humans.
Yeah, totally. So you have this video on your website that I love so much. And you mentioned this quote from your publisher where he said something along the lines of, he found your tips for finding success as an artist applicable to him in his own career as a non-musician. And since this aspiring artist community isn't made of only musicians, do you think that you could elaborate on how these tips in your book can be applicable to people across all fields? Yeah,
I think there's something to be said for reaching for your goals. How do you, like, where's your dedication to your goals at? And then what does it take to keep it up long term? And that's related to skills. It's like, whether the skill is how, do I shape my finger to make this sound on this one instrument, or whether the skill is, how do I write a good book, or how do I dance, or how, it's skills is skills, but then what do you do with that skill that makes you go further? And I think, lots of people I've read it who are not musicians who found a lot out of it. And also musicians who have been doing it for decades also got a lot out of it, because they're like, oh, it's not just me.
Sure.
There's power in that it's like, oh, it's not just me. Other people are going through that too. Interesting. Because I think we all think our struggles are very personal and we forget others go through them as well.
Right. I mean, being a musician is a very human thing. It's just kind of about continuing to improve upon your craft. And I think that's something we can all take away no matter what field you're in.
Yeah, I agree.
So if there's somebody listening who maybe wants to turn their passion into a career but doesn't know how, do you have any advice for them for taking that first step?
Yeah, I think the most important is to kind of look at your interest, but also really like pick a path and go down it. And, I'm a big fan of all the advice we're given a lot, which is write down your goals, break them down. Like where do you see yourself in 6 months, a year, 3 years? Like we've all heard it, but hearing it does not make it work unless you do it. Sure. And so like, actually, have you done it? That's my question, Have you just heard it and say, oh yeah, I think I know what it is. But if you write it down, then it actually really works. But also education, as far as not just skills, but also what are people you look up to, whose careers you'd like to emulate, and how did they go about it, and trying to like get in their mindset and seeing what decisions they made when, and trying to go about it that way can help.
Sure. And I think it's really great what you mentioned earlier, just about how what you wanted to do, there was no real tangible information out there about how to achieve it. So just, not being afraid to reach out and network and make connections and ask those scary questions, and that you don't have to be alone.
Yeah. And I think, those answers are still not out. This book is definitely like the one-stop shop because I think for musicians too, it's like, and probably for all artists, picking where is your lane. And that's really hard. That's tricky. It's like, because there's so many options, and knowing which lane is good or not good for you is really helpful just in and of itself.
Sure. Do you feel like, for maybe some people out there kind of dabble in a lot of fields within their maybe overarching umbrella, do you feel like it is helpful to kind of hone in on that thing that you are best at, or is it okay to kind of explore?
I think it's very much based on your own personality. I'm someone I'm very curious. I have lots of interests. And so every time I was told to focus on one thing, that actually backfired on me, because then I lose interest. So actually, the more different things I can do, the more like with it I stay. So I think it's true for both cases. But as far as a career, I think part of it is go to the things that interest you and then see what sticks and what you get called back for. But I think where it gets tricky, it's like when people tell you to get skills you just don't have. Like, I'm not a jazz player, and sometimes people are like, you should do it. You can totally do it. It's like, well, I could, but like, how much time would it take that I could do something instead that I'm already kind of naturally okay at, and at least improve upon that, instead of something I'm properly bad at and trying to get that to be okay.
Right. Yeah, that is always interesting. As a musician, I feel like sometimes people just assume that we can do everything. Like, oh yeah, you can play jazz and you can play classical and you can play musical theater. So you can give a classical concert tomorrow, right? And then next week accompany a musical and whatnot. And sometimes I guess when you get to the point of honing in on your skills, that it's okay to say no and focus in a little bit, but also okay to explore and see what you are good at.
I think also it builds trust with employers. Because I think if I meet someone and they tell me they're good at it, I'll be like, oh, you're new to New York. Like, where I'm trying to figure out where can I put this person in what kind of gigs. And I'm like, what do you specialize in? And they'll be like, oh, I do it all. I'm like, okay, but like what style or like what gigs are you looking for? Do you want to accompany singers? Do you want to do audition? Oh yeah, anything. And then I don't know where to put them. So I usually will not put them anywhere. But if I get someone who's like, oh, I've got like 4 years of experience accompanying singers, and I've done this many years of audition play, I'm like, oh, okay, great. Next time there's an audition, I can pass them on to that. Like, that clarity is so much easier.
Sure. So you don't actually see it as a limitation if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm a really amazing sight reader and I would love to accompany auditions, but I don't feel like I have the technical skills to, play first keys in a pit. You will almost respect them more because they know what they're good at.
I mean, technical skills in the pit, I would have questions about that.
Oh, sure.
Because if you're really good at sight reading, why can you not play in a pit? And if it's just a volume pedal thing, then, figure a way to learn it. But yeah, no, if somebody's like, oh, I'm amazing at jazz, I'm amazing at pop, I definitely don't send me on opera gigs. I'm like, great, I can definitely do all those things.
Right.
I can send you on those and not on those other ones. That's easy.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And maybe that was not a good example because yeah, I guess you would hope that an audition pianist would be fine in a pit. But
I mean, you have like people that are, I have one person one day who said, I do all the styles. And I was like, okay, I mean, and that person sent me a reel of them. And it was like, that is true. That person does indeed do all the styles. And so, I mean, I send that person to so many gigs because it's like, well, I can trust, and they're nice and all of that. And they were new to New York and like they got work so fast.
Sure. So I like what you just said. You were like, so they've got all these skills and they're nice. Like how big of a role does that play?
Oh, it's everything. It's everything. Like you cannot, you can't. And I mean, that's like as bad a mistake. And we've all made it sometimes, I'm sure. I mean, I have moments I can think of where I'm like, man, I kind of wish I could go back and be a little bit like nicer or something, you know, but you try your best all the time. I think it's very important because I think you'll keep getting hired as long as you're nice. And then when you're not, you won't.
Right. It's so nice to hear that out loud because a person could work their entire life to be the most technical and amazing pianist across all the styles. But if at the end of the day that they're not kind, they could ruin it all.
Sorry.
Oh,
I don't know.
Okay.
People just ring the bell in my building for no reason. Like I don't expect anything. I hope it's not going to happen again. So what was
That's New York for you.
You know, and it wakes me up sometimes. They're just like 8 a.m. Great time to ring all the bells.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. But anyways, sorry. What was your question?
Oh, gosh. Now I have to go back and remember.
So about being nice.
Right. So right. So I was just saying it's kind of, it's nice to hear it out loud that, you know, a person could spend their entire life 8 hours a day at the piano perfecting their skills and they could screw it all up by just not being a nice person. And it's nice to hear that, you know, that's highly respected in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly about not having an attitude. It's mostly that because, you know, I think some people too think like you have to be really outgoing, but there are many musicians are very much introverts who don't necessarily do like the small talk and stuff. And like, there's definitely room for them in the industry, like across the board, which I think they always kind of feel bad about. They're like, I'm not really good at all of that. And it's okay. I mean, they sound great and they're nice. So it's
right.
Okay.
So we'll hire you.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So just to wrap up here a little bit, if somebody wanted to purchase your book, where could they do so and where can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, it's going to be on Amazon and you can buy it Kindle or as a soft cover book. That's going to be coming out in about 1 or 2 months. So we're in April 2020 right now. So just to give us an idea. And otherwise to write me directly, my website, geraldineanello.com/home. Or /contact for the contact page. But yeah, I'm also on Facebook. I read my incoming messages, including the ones from people who are not my friends. I check those. So I'm pretty easy to reach. I like talking to people.
I love you. You have to mention you check that mailbox where Facebook messages go to die.
I do. I really do. Like pretty much every day I'm on there. I mean, I get a lot of messages on there. So
sure. No, that's great. Well, Geraldine, thank you so much for being here today. This was amazing to talk to you and kind of learn your industry insider secrets.
Thanks, Rachel, for having me.
Yes, of course. So for more information on Geraldine, you can click the link on your podcast player to see our show notes. Think you know somebody that might make a great guest for the show, you can reach out to our team at aspiringartistpodcast@gmail.com. I am Rachel Sandler. Thank you so much for listening to Aspiring Artist Podcast. I hope you are feeling inspired and ready to tackle your craft. Catch you next time.